The keys fell out of an old winter coat I hadn't worn in months. At first, I thought they were mine. Just another forgotten set mixed in with the junk that accumulates over the years. But when I picked them up, I immediately knew they weren't. There were 3 keys on a cheap metal ring. 1 apartment key, 1 mailbox key, and a small plastic tag with the number 4B printed on it. I stood in our laundry room staring at them longer than I should have. My wife, Melissa, was upstairs helping our daughter with homework. The TV was on. Dinner was in the oven. Everything looked completely normal. That's what makes this memory so disturbing now. For 12 years we'd been married. We had a daughter, a mortgage, arguments about bills, vacations we couldn't really afford, and routines so predictable they felt permanent. Nothing about my life suggested I was about to discover something that would destroy almost everything I believed. I slipped the keys into my pocket and told myself there had to be a simple explanation. The problem was that deep down, before I even asked a single question, I already knew they weren't mine. And I knew exactly whose coat I'd found them in. Looking back, the warning signs had been there for years. Not dramatic signs. Small things. Melissa became protective of her phone. She started taking evening walks alone. Sometimes she'd leave the house claiming she needed groceries and return 2 hours later with 1 shopping bag. Whenever I asked where she'd been, she always had an answer. A believable answer. That was the problem. Nothing ever sounded suspicious enough to challenge. I trusted her completely. Actually, that's not true. I trusted the version of her that existed in my head. The version who held my hand during hospital visits. The version who cried when our daughter was born. The version who laughed at terrible movies with me on Friday nights. When little doubts appeared, I buried them. Every marriage has rough patches, right? Every couple drifts apart sometimes. I convinced myself that maturity meant ignoring insecurity. Meanwhile, she seemed emotionally distant more often. Not cold. Just absent. Like someone sitting beside you physically while being somewhere else entirely. I noticed it. I hated noticing it. And then I spent years pretending I didn't. The keys stayed hidden in my desk drawer for almost a week. I kept waiting for an innocent explanation to magically appear. One evening, while Melissa was showering, I finally asked. As casually as possible. "Hey, do these belong to you?" She glanced at them for less than a second. "No." Too fast. Way too fast. I remember that clearly. Most people would have picked them up. Examined them. Asked where they came from. She didn't. She looked away immediately. "Why?" she asked. I shrugged. "Found them in your coat." The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds. It felt like 30. "Oh. They must be my sister's." Her sister lived 2 states away. The excuse made no sense. I waited for her to elaborate. She didn't. Instead, she changed the subject completely. That night I barely slept. For the first time, the possibility entered my mind that my wife might be lying to me. Not about something small. About something important. I hated myself for thinking it. But once that thought appeared, it refused to leave. A few days later, I did something I'm still ashamed of. I followed her. I wish I could say I had noble reasons. I didn't. I was scared. Obsessed. Desperate. Melissa told me she was meeting a coworker for coffee after work. Instead of going home, I parked across the street from her office and waited. 40 minutes later she came outside. Alone. She didn't go toward any cafe. She drove across town. I followed from a distance, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. She eventually stopped in front of an ordinary apartment building. Nothing special. Nothing memorable. Just brick walls and faded balconies. Then I watched her walk directly inside. No hesitation. No confusion. Like someone returning home. I sat there for nearly an hour. My stomach felt sick. When she finally emerged, she looked relaxed. Happy even. The expression on her face haunted me. I hadn't seen her smile like that around me in years. When she got home that evening, she kissed me on the cheek and asked how my day was. I nearly threw up listening to her. The next morning, I called in sick. I drove back to the building. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe proof that I was overreacting. Instead, I found apartment 4B. The number from the key tag. I stood outside the door feeling like a criminal. Then I did something even worse. I tried the key. It worked. I didn't go inside. Fear stopped me. But the lock turning was enough. The keys belonged there. The apartment existed. And Melissa had lied. For several minutes I just stood in the hallway staring at the door. My entire body felt numb. There are moments in life when reality shifts. You know things will never return to what they were 5 minutes earlier. That hallway was one of those moments. I remember hearing footsteps nearby and quickly leaving. Back in my car, I couldn't stop shaking. I called my brother. He listened quietly. Then he asked one question. "Are you sure you want to know what's behind that door?" At the time, I thought the answer was yes. Now I'm not so sure. 2 days later, I got my answer. And I wish I hadn't. Melissa left for work. I waited an hour. Then I returned to apartment 4B. This time I opened the door. The apartment wasn't empty. It wasn't a secret office. It wasn't a storage unit. It looked lived in. Photos on shelves. Coffee mugs in the sink. A blanket draped across a couch. And framed on a side table was a photograph. Melissa. Standing beside a man I had never seen before. His arm around her waist. Both smiling. Not friendly smiling. Couple smiling. The kind of smile people have when they're building a life together. I felt my knees weaken. Then I noticed something worse. Several photographs. Different seasons. Different years. This wasn't recent. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time affair. Whatever this was, it had been happening for a very long time. I left before anyone returned. The entire drive home felt unreal. Like I was watching someone else's tragedy unfold from a distance. That night I confronted her. I placed the photographs on the kitchen table. She froze instantly. I've never forgotten that expression. Pure terror. "Who is he?" I asked. She didn't answer. "How long?" Still silence. Finally she sat down and started crying. Not dramatic crying. Not movie crying. The exhausted kind. The kind that comes from someone who knows the truth is finally over. 7 years? She whispered. I genuinely thought I'd misheard her. What? 7 years? I remember laughing. Not because anything was funny. Because my brain couldn't process the number. 7 years? More than half our marriage. More than half our daughter's life. Tell me you're lying. She couldn't. Instead, she buried her face in her hands. And then she said the sentence that completely shattered me. I never meant for you to find out. Not. I'm sorry. Not. I love you. Not. I made a mistake. Just that. She never meant for me to know. As if my ignorance had been the real plan all along. The story that followed was even worse. The apartment belonged to him. His name was Daniel. According to Melissa, they met through work years earlier. It started as friendship. Then emotional support. Then something else. The usual clichés. Except clichés feel different when they're destroying your life. What was the apartment for? I asked. She stared at the floor. It's where we spent time together. The understatement nearly made me explode. Time together? She nodded. I remember shouting. Louder than I ever had in my life. Our daughter was at a friend's house. Thank God. Because I completely lost control. Every memory suddenly felt contaminated. Every anniversary. Every holiday. Every family photo. I kept asking questions. She kept answering. And every answer created 10 more. How many lies? How many weekends? How many fake business trips? The number became meaningless. Eventually, betrayal reaches a size too large to measure. That's where I was. Drowning in details while somehow still unable to understand any of it. Then came the secret that hurt even more. A month after the confrontation, Daniel contacted me directly. I almost ignored him. Instead, I answered. We met at a diner outside town. He looked nervous, guilty, broken. Within 5 minutes, he told me something Melissa never had. He thought she was separated. For years. According to him, she claimed our marriage existed only on paper. That we lived together for our daughter. That divorce was coming eventually. I wanted to hate him. Part of me still does. But sitting there, I realized he'd been lied to as well. Not completely. But enough. Then he showed me messages. Thousands of them. Years of promises. Years of future plans. Years of discussions about moving in together. Melissa had been living 2 parallel lives. Not choosing between us. Keeping both. The realization left me feeling strangely empty. I wasn't competing against another man. I was competing against a version of reality she had invented. And somehow both of us had believed it. Our families became involved almost immediately. That made everything uglier. My parents wanted me to leave her. Her parents begged me to stay. Friends chose sides. Rumors spread. People who knew nothing suddenly had opinions about my marriage. Melissa's mother called me repeatedly. People make mistakes. I hated hearing that phrase. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is buying the wrong thing. Maintaining a secret relationship for 7 years requires thousands of deliberate choices. Eventually, I stopped answering calls. I couldn't handle anyone else's perspective. I was barely surviving my own. Meanwhile, Melissa swung between guilt and defensiveness. Some days she apologized endlessly. Other days she claimed I had emotionally neglected her. Those conversations drove me insane. Maybe I wasn't perfect. Maybe I had failed her in certain ways. But nothing justified what she'd done. I started doubting my memory. My judgment. Even my sanity. That's what prolonged betrayal does. It makes you question whether reality was ever real in the first place. The hardest part wasn't the anger. It was our daughter. She was 10. Old enough to notice everything. Too young to understand it. She started asking why Mom slept in the guest room. Why we stopped eating dinner together. Why nobody laughed anymore. I tried protecting her. Melissa tried too. But children notice pain even when nobody explains it. One evening my daughter asked if I was mad at her. That question broke me. I locked myself in the bathroom afterward and cried harder than I had since childhood. Because the damage wasn't staying between adults. It was spreading. Touching innocent people. Changing the emotional climate of our entire home. Even now, years later, I carry guilt about that period. Not guilt for the affair. Guilt for how helpless I was afterward. I couldn't fix anything. I couldn't shield her completely. I couldn't restore normal life. All I could do was survive one day at a time. And honestly, some days even that felt impossible. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. I stopped sleeping properly. Food tasted like cardboard. Everywhere I looked, something triggered memories. A restaurant. A song. A random street corner. I became obsessed with timelines. Trying to identify exactly when my marriage stopped being real. Therapy helped a little. Not immediately. Mostly it forced me to confront uncomfortable truths. I had ignored warning signs. Not because I was stupid. Because I was afraid. Afraid of conflict. Afraid of losing the future I'd imagined. The therapist once asked me a question. Would knowing sooner have hurt less? I thought about it for a long time. The answer was no. It would have hurt differently. But it still would have hurt. That realization strangely helped. For years I blamed myself for not discovering everything earlier. Eventually, I understood the responsibility belonged to the person creating the deception, not the person trusting. Trust wasn't my mistake. Abusing it was hers. Melissa and I attempted counseling. People always ask that. Yes. We tried. For nearly a year. Some sessions felt hopeful. Others felt unbearable. The biggest problem was simple. I couldn't rebuild trust because I couldn't stop discovering new lies. Every few weeks another detail emerged. Another hidden trip. Another fabricated story. Another piece of history rewritten. Trust isn't destroyed in one explosion. It's destroyed repeatedly. Each new revelation became another crack. Eventually the foundation collapsed completely. One afternoon our counselor asked whether I still believed Melissa was being fully honest. I couldn't answer yes. That silence said everything. After the session, Melissa cried in the parking lot. She begged me not to give up. Part of me wanted to stay. Part of me still loved her. That's the cruel thing nobody talks about. Love doesn't disappear immediately when trust does. Sometimes it remains. And makes leaving infinitely more painful. We divorced 18 months after I found the keys. The process was exhausting. Not dramatic. Just sad. Two people dismantling a shared life piece by piece. Furniture. Bank accounts. Schedules. Traditions. Dreams. Daniel disappeared from the picture eventually. Ironically, the relationship she'd risked everything for didn't survive either. I heard they separated shortly after. By then I barely cared. The marriage was over. The damage had already happened. Today we co-parent reasonably well. We're polite. Respectful. Distant. Sometimes I watch her during school events and wonder who she really is. Not in a hateful way. In a genuinely confused way. I spent over a decade beside someone. Yet there are entire chapters of her life I'll never fully understand. Maybe that's true of everyone. Maybe nobody is completely knowable. That thought used to comfort me. Now it mostly makes me uneasy. It's been several years since I found those keys. Most days I'm okay. At least I think I am. I've rebuilt parts of my life. I've dated again. I've learned how to be alone. I've learned how to trust cautiously. But certain moments still catch me off guard. A set of keys on a countertop. An unexplained delay. A locked phone screen. Tiny things. My mind immediately travels back to that laundry room. Back to the moment everything changed. The strangest part is that I don't miss the marriage anymore. I miss certainty. I miss believing that the people I loved were exactly who they appeared to be. Maybe that's what betrayal really steals. Not the relationship. Not the future. The certainty. If anyone reading this is ignoring obvious doubts because they're afraid of the answer, I understand. I really do. But I also know this. The truth didn't destroy my life. The lies did. And sometimes I still wonder how many more years would have passed if those keys had never fallen out of that coat.